Shemai, Sitahi, Kroisoi, Chris, Dowie, what is cracking, ladies, gents, boys, girls, anybody who just so happens to be anyone. Today we are talking about fighting fantasies, the port of Peril. Now, I pulled up a cheeky book list off Wikipedia for these fighting fantasy books, namely the Scholastic books, and this is the first new title in the Scholastic series, so we're starting off the Scholastic series with this bad boy. Now, spoilers, this book is very, very underwhelming. Now I'm going to come back to that in a bit now, but if we want to talk about the book, it was published back in 2017 under Scholastic, and it's very heavy-handed with the references to previous books. It's sort of like a tongue-in-cheek, nudge nudge, wink wink, except it's happening constantly, like sort of like a gropey man down the pub. It's like, can you just stop for a second? I just want to read the book. Yeah, it's underwhelming, like I said, but I think it's about time that we talk about the cover. And the one that I'm holding in my hand right now, there is a full art, and I think I'm gonna have to talk about the full art. I can't actually find a picture of the cover that I'm holding right now online. I'll probably find one for this video, but the full art honestly looks pretty cool. The art style's a little bit different. It's not quite what I expect from a fighting fantasy book, but I can see that they're taking this series in a different direction. I can appreciate that. It is kind of cool, just not my kind of thing. The one that I'm holding in my hand right now, aesthetically, it is very pleasing. It's like a nice brassy color with like an ogre's head. It looks pretty nice. I think I remember the ogre. I can't remember who it was meant to be, but he is in the book. It's nice. It looks nice on the bookshelf, and at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Does it look nice on your bookshelf? Yes, no, maybe. Could you repeat the question? Because you're not the boss of me now. It is a decent book. Well, it looks decent. I like it. It is what it is. I reckon if it was originally published back with the Puffin era, the cover would look pretty good back then. It'd look pretty good in the Wizards. But the Scholastic just seems to be lacking. I don't know why. It must just be a Scholastic thing. But the cover out of the way, I think we need to take this bad boy off the shelf, the metaphorical shelf, because like I said, I'm holding the book in my hand, and read what it says on the back. So the back of the book says, part story, part game. You are the hero. Are you brave enough to face the savage demons of the underworld? Evil stalks the lands as undead hordes rise from their graves to terrorize the living. Embark on an epic quest from Moonstone Hills to the shadowy streets of Port Blacksand, to the depths of Darkwood Forest, and ultimately face your worst nightmare. May your stamina never fail. Like I said, it relies quite heavily on throwbacks to previous books, because it's just name dropping absolutely everything. It's sort of like I said, nudge nudge, wink wink. And at the end of the day, it's I don't know, it just felt a little bit misleading in the back of the book. It doesn't really describe what actually happens in the story. So without further ado, let's briefly touch on the story. The bulk of the story itself has you basically following a treasure map to try and get treasure, and it's not at all hinted at the back of this book. The Port of Peril, nothing really sort of hints to you doing that. But then there's a little twist, there's a cheeky little twist. And if you don't want it to be spoiled, obviously skip ahead a minute in 3, 2, 1. The final third of this book is basically a spiritual successor to City of Thieves. Xandar Bone comes back and you have to slay him, and it's all very underwhelming, because whereas in City of Thieves you have to create this potion or whatever, you just shoot the guy, and it's just a really bad send-off to one of my favorite books, you know. It's underwhelming, like I said. So I keep saying this book's underwhelming. Now what do I mean? Well, when I say it's underwhelming, I feel as if it relies too heavily on throwbacks to other books rather than just trying to stand out as a book by itself. It keeps referencing these books with like tongue-in-cheek references, but I also feel that the Scholastic reprints, the Scholastic series, has changed its target demographic, maybe from like a teen to young adult, you know, with like older children to more younger teens to children. So you got these throwbacks to more mature books that are darker in themes with scarier art style, but then it's being sort of targeted towards children who probably haven't read these books, probably don't know what's happening, and it's just confusing. And it is confusing, because reading through this book, now I love Ian Livingstone's writing, but it's very clearly different. It's there's not that much of an edge to it. It's not scary. There isn't much seriousness to it. It's quite, now the books have always been quite campy and fun, but this one is just sort of padded out. It's safe, you know what I mean? It's quite safe. Nothing really happens. Whereas in other books, if you needed to regain stamina, they'll probably put like a potion somewhere, or a creepy puddle, or maybe a fountain, and then there's a 50-50 that you'll drink it and it'll just dissolve you from the inside out and you have a horrible, horrible death. But in this one, you're just sort of given food constantly, because with the food, it's not going to be trapped, is it? And I don't know. It's very, very safe, it's very child friendly, and I think it's a different direction from what the books used to be, and this is reflected in the art style. The art style is more child friendly now, and it's just kind of weird, because, I don't know, if you're a younger child and you're like, oh yeah, this is really fun, I love this, and then maybe you go back and read House of Hell or whatever, you could be like, oh, this is a bit darker, this isn't quite as fun and innocent as I liked. It's like going from a Peppa Pig book to maybe Animal Farm. You know, Peppa Pig and Snowball the Pig, they're both pigs, but one's got a darker theme than the other one. Peppa Pig might just have the sass of, I don't know, 1,000 sassy women, but Snowball, I think Snowball even gets round. I'm not going to spoil that book, but what I'm saying is there's a noticeable shift in theme, and it's just quite underwhelming. It's like, anticlimactic. And the same thing sort of goes with the art style. The art style in this book is sort of very computer generated, and if it's not just done, it's obviously not hand drawn, is what I'm trying to say, and as a result it sort of falls flat. It sort of falls flat as well, because you could tell that there's some things that it chose not to illustrate. There's a section in the book where it's briefly mentioned that there are skulls on a wall, and they discuss that how an eerie sound comes out of them when the wind blows through. And I can't help but feel that if this book was maybe published 10 years ago, even 20, well, probably 20 years ago, what you'd have is a really nice illustration of all these creepy looking skulls, bit of meat falling off them, you know, birds sat on them. And it's just that because of the change in audience, there's a lot more of tell, don't show. They have to describe a lot more things rather than just showing you. For instance, there's this horrible monster thing in one of the dungeons, and instead of showing you what it looks like, they sort of go into so much detail describing it to you, and it's like, I don't really care. You could have just done this with an illustration. And I'm not hating on the author, I'm not hating on the illustrator, you know, they've done what they've been paid to do, right? But what I'm saying is that I don't really see how today's children can't really handle this. It's just weird. It's like, you know, it's a fighting fantasy book. Just show them what the creature looks like. And I get it, I do get it. If it's a change in audience, today's generation, we tend to be a lot more safer with the younger audiences. Especially when I grew up, we had stuff like Courage the Cowardly Dog, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Goosebumps, and yeah, in hindsight, they weren't that scary, but as a child, they were quite scary. Today, we don't really have that. The story itself is very simple. You get a treasure map, you go off to find the treasure, and then it spins into another story. Okay, that's fair enough, but none of it's very dark. There aren't many traps, and you're just sort of spoon-fed a lot of stamina items to keep you alive. The difficulty isn't a problem for me. I've never cared about the difficulty, unless it's just relentlessly hard for the sake of being relentlessly hard, like Reach of Havoc, which I just didn't enjoy the book anyway. I like the story, but there isn't much story there. The book relies heavily on throwbacks to previous titles, but it's sort of like the Ghostbusters reboot, where they just sort of it's tongue-in-cheek and it's heavily reliant on people who enjoyed the original Ghostbusters going to see it. And it's like, ooh, it's not really the same. It's not at the same standard as previous titles have been. So, you know, I don't really hate the book. I don't think the book's bad. I just think it's very underwhelming. You know, I'm not going to say that I hate the book. I'm not going to say that I wish I didn't read it. You know, it is a fun little read, but it's underwhelming if you're expecting anything more than just sort of like an offshoot. It's sort of like the Forest of Doom tier, where you just sort of do nothing. It's not really there to entertain. You just sort of exist, and you meet a bunch of characters that existed in previous titles, but obviously if you are, I suppose, the new target demographic, you're not going to know who these characters are because well, the books came out before you were born. It's just weird. It's weird and I'm confused. But yeah, you know, I didn't hate the book. I did give it 3 out of 5. But that's about it, guys. Would I recommend it? And it's going to be maybe not if you're an older reader. But that's about that, guys. The next book is going to be what is it? The Gates of Hell, Gates of Summon, Gates of Death, by Charlie Higson. So I'm hoping that's good. If not, well, I don't know. We're gonna see if this series is very much aimed at a younger demographic again. But yeah, hopefully you're going to be here next Thursday. It's going to be a fun little read. I say a fun little read, I'm reading the book. I'm going to enjoy the book. But yeah, hopefully you're going to be here. So I'm going to see you then. So without further ado, take care, guys. Have a lovely week. Have a lovely day. Have a lovely existence. Ta-ra and goodbye.